88,000 people roaring in the dark, a global audience of billions watching a single piece of grass in the Middle East. At the center of it all, Lionel Messi lifts the FIFA World Cup while wearing the black and gold bisht, a traditional Arabic cloak. This gold trophy represents the final milestone in a 12-year, $220 billion acquisition process. Reaching this specific moment required a decade of massive sovereign spending to transform a desert state into a global sporting hub. The mechanics of that transformation relied on a deployment of illicit funds, the systemic exploitation of migrant labor, and on-field statistical anomalies. Executing this required the total alignment of FIFA's regulatory body, the financial assets of the Qatari state, and the corporate hierarchy of the Paris Saint-Germain football club. This 2022 final was a perfectly engineered global broadcast image, calculated by a sovereign state to project soft power through the world's most watched sport. To understand the final image, look at the initial purchase. In December 2010, Qatar submitted its bid to host the tournament. The logistics of the proposal were hostile to the sport itself. Qatar possessed little football infrastructure and offered a summer climate that would physically endanger the athletes. They were competing against established global heavyweights with turnkey infrastructure, including the United States, Japan, and Australia. Yet the Qatari bid won. That victory was secured by exploiting the internal architecture of the FIFA Executive Committee, an organization primed for structural bribery. Of the 22 executive committee members who voted on the bid, 16 were investigated or sanctioned for corruption. Members like Jack Warner and Nicholas Leos were lobbied. Qatari operator Mohammed bin Hammam managed a $5 million slush fund to guarantee Federation's support. But direct cash was only part of the strategy. 9 days before the final vote, the lobbying effort escalated into international statecraft. At a private lunch at the Elysee Palace, French President Nicolas Sarkozy sat down with the Crown Prince of Qatar and UEFA President Michel Platini. Following that meeting, Platini threw his voting bloc behind Qatar. Shortly after, Qatari state funds purchased the French club Paris Saint-Germain and injected billions of dollars into French television via the launch of BIN Sports. The right to host the World Cup operated as diplomatic currency, facilitating multi-billion-dollar economic transactions between European and Middle Eastern governments. Over the subsequent decade, FIFA's leadership deepened its reliance on Qatari capital. Investigations uncovered a highly secretive broadcast contract signed between FIFA and Qatari state-owned media Al Jazeera. The agreement guaranteed FIFA an enormous sum of $400 million for regional broadcast rights. Buried within that contract was a heavily conditional clause, an additional success bonus of $100 million. The text explicitly stated that this bonus would only be paid to FIFA if Qatar successfully secured the rights to host the 2022 tournament. This architecture proved lucrative. By the end of the 2022 cycle, FIFA reported a record-breaking $7.5 billion in total revenue. By structuring its own corporate survival around petrodollar bonuses, FIFA forfeited its capacity to act as an independent regulator for the host nation. With the regulators neutralized, Qatar began building the $220 billion infrastructure required to host the games. To assemble 7 brand-new stadiums in a desert, Qatar relied on the kafala labor system. Kafala legally binds migrant workers to their employers. The sponsor dictates their legal status, their ability to change jobs, and their right to exit. This creates an economic trap. Migrants routinely paid up to $4,000 in illegal recruitment fees, only to arrive in Doha and earn a minimum wage of roughly $274 a month. If a worker attempted to flee abusive conditions or unpaid labor, they ran afoul of absconding laws, exposing them to immediate arrest and deportation. The physical toll was devastating. Thousands of healthy, young migrant workers died during the 12-year construction boom. The vast majority of these deaths went uninvestigated, officially recorded by the state as natural causes. Despite widespread documentation of these abuses, FIFA refused to establish a compensation fund for the families of the deceased and injured workers. The gleaming, air-conditioned stadiums broadcast to the world were built directly atop a foundation of modern, systemic exploitation. These identical boardroom dynamics shifted directly onto the grass pitch as the tournament progressed into the final knockout stages. Over the course of 7 matches, the Argentine national team was awarded 5 penalty kicks. At 5 penalties in 7 games, Argentina reached a frequency never seen in the history of the tournament. Many decisions required highly subjective interpretations. Against Poland and France, referees rewarded minimal contact inside the box. The tournament's VAR technology presented a stark paradox. It was deployed with millimeter precision to disallow goals, yet remained passive when referees made highly questionable foul calls favoring Argentina. This leniency applied to disciplinary actions as well. During the intense quarterfinal against the Netherlands, Lionel Messi committed a blatant, deliberate handball that went unpunished by the referee, sparing him a yellow card and a potential suspension. Following that same match, the Argentine squad openly taunted the Dutch bench, violating FIFA's fair play code without facing institutional consequences. An unprecedented volume of penalty decisions, combined with a sudden laxity in rule enforcement, systematically insulated the tournament's most lucrative asset. All of these mechanisms, the bribery, the labor economics, and the compliant officiating, converged precisely at the final whistle. By 2022, the state of Qatar owned Paris Saint-Germain. Because Lionel Messi played for Paris Saint-Germain, Qatar essentially owned the tournament's greatest star. Through the lens of state-backed corporate ownership, an Argentine failure on Qatari soil was a commercially unacceptable outcome. When the Emir of Qatar draped the bisht over Messi's shoulders before the trophy lift, he branded the sport's pinnacle as sovereign property. This act of cultural branding claimed the greatest achievement in modern football for the glory of the host state. The success of this operation lays a rigid blueprint for the future. Upcoming bids for the 2030 and 2034 World Cups will rely on the exact same model of massive capital expenditure shielding human rights abuses. Qatar 2022 established that with enough capital, a state can purchase the stadium, the infrastructure, and the narrative history